Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to a brand new episode of the TechoSpace podcast series. In this podcast episode, I'm super thrilled and honored to welcome one of the guests who happens to be from Berlin, Germany, and he's none other than Mr. Bill Mulligan, the Cilium and eBPF pollinator at Isovalent and now at Cisco. So now, off to you, Bill. So, I've just given an introduction about you. So, Bill, would you like to add more points and give a deep, introduction about yourself to our listeners and our audience alike?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I work at Isovalent, which is a part of Cisco, and there I work on growing the Cilium and eBPF communities. So I'm a maintainer of the Cilium project, which is a graduated project in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And on the eBPF side, I maintain eBPF.io, which is a community resource for the eBPF community.
That gives a complete understanding, and it's pretty interesting. So now Bill has given a clear idea about a clear picture about what Bill has actually dealing with. So through this conversation, it's going to be much more insightful, and I completely assure you it's going to be really fun. So at the stroke of this hour, 9:20 Melbourne time, let's kick off with the podcast episode. So now, Bill, off to you. So, I'm pretty much interested to know. So, like, can you just give me a walkthrough about your journey when you started out as, started out as a community advocate for Cilium and eBPF during your tenure at, Isovalent, and now all the way to Cisco company?
Yeah, so I would even rewind before that. I actually don't have any background in tech. I did my undergrad in biochemistry. It was only after getting my master's that I kind of took my first plunge into the tech world. On my first day at this startup, they said, hey, you need to set up a Kubernetes cluster, but I'd never seen the command line, never written a single line of code, and it was kind of like the deep dive headfirst into it. Since then, I've worked at a couple different startups, and the CNCF, which is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, kind of like the center of the ecosystem around like all cloud native infrastructure. And kind of along my journey, what I always found myself coming back to was interacting with other people, enabling people to do things that they're interested in. I think that's like the core idea of open source that really excites me, is kind of bringing this community of people together. And so when I was looking for different options after CNCF, I knew of Cilium as one of the projects in the ecosystem, and I got really excited about it because of eBPF and the kind of potential that it was unlocking in the cloud native ecosystem. And so what I came over to Isovalent to do was to really grow the community around Cilium. And it's been an awesome ride seeing Cilium go from an incubated to a graduated project, and now one of the fastest moving projects in the cloud native ecosystem.
That's brilliant to know. Now, if I would just like to understand about CNCF, like how would you explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, so CNCF is a open source foundation under the Linux Foundation, and it's specifically focused on cloud native projects. So things like Kubernetes, Prometheus, Envoy, and what they do is they host projects and enable these projects to be used by end users. So they provide a variety of different services, like for instance, running KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, which is the largest open source conference in the world, and also providing a lot of services to the projects too. So things like cloud credits for CI, running mentorship programs. I'm actually a mentor this year or like this term for one of the projects under Cilium, and doing a variety of other services for projects too. So they make it easier for open source projects to operate and provide a neutral home for all of these projects. So companies can collaborate together on these projects to make them successful and to make them useful for end users.
That's brilliant, Bill. So that gives me a clear understanding about CNCF now. So now heading on to the next one thing, everyone, we always want to know about key insights, but now, Bill, I want to take the key insights from your end. So Bill, during your tenure, like what are those, interesting key insights that you have gained in with respect to these, the Cilium and eBPF ecosystem, and what is that thing that would, surprise me and our listeners hearing that?
Yeah, so I think I'll kind of talk about the reasons why Cilium and eBPF are exciting for me. So I'll start first with eBPF. So eBPF is a technology in the Linux kernel that allows us to essentially modify things on the fly. So the example that people usually like to give is JavaScript is to the browser what eBPF is to the kernel. And so to kind of break down that analogy, if you think about web pages before JavaScript, you essentially had static pages where you were just reading information, right? And then once you introduce JavaScript, suddenly these web pages could interact. You could change them. You could, click on buttons. You could move around on the map, right? And so that adds a lot of new functionality into what used to be a static system. And that's a lot of what eBPF does now too. So the Linux kernel is a 30-year-old technology. It's got kind of a lot of history in like how it's built, but suddenly with eBPF, we can kind of like deconstruct different parts of it. We can add new functionality on the fly, and we can rebuild a lot of things, and we can also rebuild things better, right? So it's adding innovation back into the Linux kernel and making like Linux exciting again. And then so that's kind of why I'm excited about eBPF. And then Cilium leverages eBPF as the underlying technology to bring networking, observability, and security into the cloud native era, right? So cloud native infrastructure has a lot of new demands in terms of like scalability and flexibility. And by leveraging eBPF, Cilium is able to deliver that for the cloud native world in networking, security, and observability.
That's brilliant. Now, if I would just like to ask you, or let's say, if suppose I have a question to you, and I'm a pretty novice to these to Cilium and eBPF. So, how would you explain the technologies of the same to me?
Yeah, so eBPF is allowing you to run essentially small programs in the Linux kernel. So when a specific event happens, like open this file or make this network call, then when that happens, you're able to run a program that changes the functionality of what's happening. So you can reroute the packet to a different destination, or you can block a process from opening a file on the security side, or a lot of different other things now too. So eBPF is really kind of like a general purpose way to modify the functionality of the Linux kernel on the fly. And then the way that Cilium leverages that, so it originally began in Kubernetes clusters, being able to modify or provide networking in the cloud native space. So providing node-to-node connectivity or pod-to-pod connectivity, like this application can talk to this application, and setting up that networking infrastructure. And now it's expanded into additional areas like security and observability, all using eBPF as the underlying technology.
That's a brilliant understanding about it. Now, Bill, now you just were mentioning about about the cloud networking. You were mentioning about the security and observability. Now, on that note, I just wanted to understand, like, what are the impactful initiatives that you have taken to advance the same?
Yeah, so kind of what I was saying before about open source, like what I love about it is like the community. So people are able to do what they're interested in. So I would say a lot of things in Cilium isn't done by me specifically, but it's done by a variety of different people in the ecosystem. So Cilium is the third fastest moving project in the whole like CNCF world. So it's hard to say like, oh, I kind of did all this, right?
Okay.
But I would say like the biggest things that people talk about, why they're excited about using Cilium, I'll kind of like break it down from networking, observability, and security. So on the networking side, we're really seeing as cloud native infrastructure grows, people running not a single Kubernetes cluster, but multiple Kubernetes clusters.
Okay.
And the problem then is how do we link all of these Kubernetes clusters together in a manageable way? And Cilium provides cluster mesh to be able to link multiple clusters together in kind of like a seamless experience. And people really kind of love that from the networking side. On the observability side, I would say probably people's number one favorite feature of Cilium is Hubble. It provides both the service map and also gives you kind of an insight into your network traffic, like why was this packet dropped? And that really helps for debugging things, especially in a world of microservices where you have lots of microservices talking to each other. Being able to debug that networking is critical for understanding what's going wrong in your infrastructure. And Hubble has really helped teams go from debugging for hours or days, like down to even minutes. And then on the security side, number one feature is definitely around network policy. So front end should be able to talk to back end, or this front end shouldn't talk to that front end, or we want to sandbox this specific customer and their environment. So really being able to lock down your network is critical.
That completely, summarizes. Now, what exactly do you mean by something called a cluster mesh? Like, I mean, that name sounds pretty interesting to me. So why did they name it as a mesh altogether with respect to the clusters?
Yeah, I mean, I think mesh is like a very loaded and overused term. But it's we're being able to mesh one cluster with another in a seamless network. And so that's why we called it cluster mesh, is being able to link clusters together.
Okay. That's an app that's a pretty apt kind of apt kind of a summary for that, right? So now, I mean, I've just come to know this, Bill, that you have been a prominent speaker at numerous events. So I mean, so would you like to give me and our listeners a heads up about like what are the number of events that you participated in, and through those events, what is that you have shared to the people who are present there?
Yeah, so I've gone to a lot of different conferences in my time. The one I've gone to the most, though, is KubeCon Cloud Native Con. I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere around 20 of them. And it's the biggest open source conference in the world, and it's really where the ecosystem around cloud native comes together. I think what I've learned going to all of them is like you see really the cycle of innovation play out. You see kind of like the first presentation about a project to where it becomes a graduated project. I saw this happen like with Cilium, going from like initial idea all the way through to becoming a graduated project. And I think it's really cool to go there and meet people. I think like in the world of open source, people are spread all around the world. I have colleagues in 33 different countries, right? Can't just walk down the hallway to talk with them. And being able to
All
go
right.
to a conference like this, I've been able to meet not only my colleagues, but different people that I work with in the ecosystem, where we're able to get a lot of done when we have these face-to-face interactions.
All right. So like, I mean, when you're talking about these events, like in how many countries have you participated in with respect to these public speaking and conferences?
That's a good question. I actually haven't counted it up. I would guess it's probably somewhere in the range of 10 to 15. So
Wow, that's a good number. So, have did you ever get a chance to participate in a conference that was held in India or somewhere in Australia?
yeah, I actually went to KubeCon Cloud Native Con India last year, and it was in Delhi.
Okay, that's pretty good in the capital city. So, how was the event like? Was the event like completely rushed up, or was the event like a a start kind of a thing, like with I mean, less number of people attending the event?
So it was the first time it's ever been hosted, and it was sold out. So they actually
Oh,
they need to get a bigger venue for the one coming up this year. It was a really awesome event. I know there's a huge developer population in India, and there's a lot of people working in cloud native from India. So it was great to be able to go there and meet a lot of them and have discussions.
that's brilliant. That's brilliant to know. Probably, if there's any event that's happening in India or for that matter in Australia, I would be really interested to attend the KubeCon event. And coincidentally, Bill, I think 2 months back I attended one KubeCon event that was there in Melbourne, and that was a pretty small one, but we were having that that direct, I mean, transmission to London's Cube Gold event. I believe if I'm getting the name of the event right. So they just gave us a clear picture about what are the companies who are there in that in platinum, gold, silver. So which was completely new to me, and a lot of interviews from the known people in the in the Kubernetes space. So that was pretty much like an interesting one, I would feel.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So now, I mean, now I'm personally very curious to know this. Like, what drove your transition all the way from sales and marketing all the way into the the community space of IT? Like, what exactly went into that?
Yeah, so I started out in sales just because it's easy place to start. And I think the part of the sales job that I liked was really enabling people to do what they want to, right? You're selling them a product, but you're really selling them a solution, a way to solve their problems. And being able to talk to people and be like, hey, what is your problem? Like, and how can I help solve it? I think was always what was exciting for me. And I think when you're looking at community work, that's also what you're doing is like people form a community around like a problem that they're trying to solve. And I think like the fun thing though is like people are doing it because they're passionate about it. It's not because like it's job
Yeah.
or anything. It's like they're like, this is what really excites me. And so being able to draw people into that and make them excited, I think is like always really fun. And especially with open source, like you're kind of putting value out into the world that other people are able to enjoy, and that makes them really excited about it. Like it's really nice to go to KubeCon and be working at the Cilium booth, and a lot of people come by and say like, hey, like I love Cilium, really great project, and I appreciate all the work you do. And that's like always a nice feeling to have when people say like little things like that to you.
That's completely that's brilliant, and that's good to know, Bill. Now, Bill, I'm just curious to know this. Like at the start of this conversation, also you just came up with a point called eBPF.io. So I wanted to understand like what went into the creation of eBPF.io and what was your role in developing it.
Yeah, so eBPF.io is kind of a collection of community resources around eBPF. I would say the two main things that people go there for is one, we have a very long page on like what is eBPF. So breaking down the different components like the verifier, the JIT compiler, what an BPF program is, the different libraries that there is for eBPF, and then also like the project landscape. So a landscape of a lot of the big open source projects that are leveraging eBPF as the underlying engine. So with those kind of like two different things are the main things. And my role in it was there's kind of like an initial version of the website, but we kind of wanted to refresh and modernize it. So we updated the content, brought it into like a new design, brought forward some of the content. And then beyond that, we also added a lot of like learning resources too. So things like case studies, labs from different providers around the ecosystem. I wrote the illustrated children's guide to eBPF as an easy way to kind of like get into the ecosystem. So that's on there too. So it's really like a community resource to kind of like start your journey with eBPF.
All right. That's I mean, that's really interesting to know. Like, Bill, the more I'm talking about it, the more, the insights with respect to eBPF are becoming very much interesting to me. I can totally, tell that. Now, Bill, mostly I'm curious to know this. Like, for people who are new to these technologies, especially me, I just wanted to understand, like, how do eBPF and Kubernetes, they complement each other?
Yeah, so Kubernetes is kind of becoming, they say like Linux or the cloud or the next generation of infrastructure of like how we manage applications in the cloud native world. So being able to orchestrate containers or now even orchestrate virtual machines are starting to migrate onto that. And I would say eBPF is becoming the technology that unlocks a lot of innovation in Kubernetes. So that's kind of like what Cilium is doing with it too. So for example, being able to have more high performance or more flexible networking for Kubernetes, right? That's how they're kind of enabling each other. Or another project in the cloud native ecosystem is a project called Pixie. And so that's an observability solution. So being able to track like how your applications are doing. And that's being powered by eBPF. OpenTelemetry also has a lot of eBPF collectors to simplify the collection of observability things from your applications. So eBPF is a way to kind of like unlock the innovation in the cloud native ecosystem.
So, I'm pretty much aware of the fact that Kubernetes and, Prometheus are fitting their picture into DevOps methodology. So I wanted to understand, like, on which phase is eBPF and Selenium, I'm sorry, Cilium part of the DevOps methodology or framework?
Yeah, so Cilium is, like I said before, like networking, observability, and security. And it, like a lot of things in cloud native, it does that by like providing a lot of automation around a lot of these things. So by leveraging eBPF, Cilium is able to kind of automate a lot of things that use processes that used to be manual. And so, yeah, Cilium, maybe we can just cut this question.
All right, no problem. Yep. So now, I'm just keen to know, to understand this, Bill. So based on your experience, so I wanted to understand, like, what are the types of technologies and integrations do you think that eBPF is able to, expand out into the coming years?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for both the projects ahead. I think like we're still in the very early innings for eBPF, even though it's been in the Linux kernel for 10 years now. We're just getting to the point where people have like the long-term supported kernels that they're putting into production and are actually able to just start like using the technology. And so I think where we are now with eBPF is like where we were with Kubernetes in 2015. We're starting to hear the first use cases and stories and really being able to see. I think really the decade ahead is where is going to be the decade of innovation with eBPF. The first decade was really, building out the technology, and this next one is like leveraging this technology. And I think that's really exciting. It's expanding into so many use cases, from networking, observability, security, tracing and profiling, even into things like scheduling or how external devices interact with the Linux kernel. So I think there's a lot of innovation ahead for eBPF. And then for Cilium, it originally began as a Kubernetes networking technology, but now it's really expanded into so much more. I think we're really seeing the convergence of IT infrastructure. So you're not just running your containers over here, your virtual machines here, and your like bare metal machines here. We want kind of like a centralized way to manage that. And Cilium is becoming a really good way to do that by providing a consistent networking experience across all of your IP infrastructure. So being able to not just be Kubernetes, but being able to network all of your infrastructure together and provide a unified like control plane is really what's being able to do that. And then on top of that, layering on the observability, how your application's doing, where there are problems in your networking infrastructure, and then providing the security on top of that, because we know cybersecurity is like a critical topic for everyone right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That completely explains the answer, Bill. Now, Bill, I just am, very keen to know this. Like you were just mentioning a lot about projects. So when you talk about projects, is it like a client-centric project, or is it like an in-house project that eBPF and Cilium is coming up with? Like, what goes on with that?
So Cilium and eBPF are both open source projects, both hosted by the Linux Foundation. So eBPF is part of the Linux kernel, so like part of Linux itself. And then Cilium is under the CNCF, so the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, as a graduated project.
Okay, all right. Okay, though I think that actually explains my doubt of being that whether it's an industry centric project or a client centric project. It's an underlying technology for for eBPF Cilium. Yeah, yeah. Now, if I would just like to ask you this, so I mean in this technology, or let's say while working with Cilium and eBPF, like I mean with respect to data processing and observability, what are those challenges that you have observed all these years?
Yeah, so I think as we're moving further and further into cloud era, right, there's a lot of microservices, like infrastructure is expanding. And with that expanding infrastructure kind of comes with an explosion of data too, especially with eBPF. Like you're able to see everything that's happening in the Linux kernel and like modify it too. So the question now becomes, is we have a lot of data, like what should we do with it? And I think the challenge with eBPF is that you can see everything, but how do you kind of search through the haystack to find the needle that's super important? And so being able to be smart about what data you collect with eBPF and how you process it, export it, and use it is like critical for that. And so that's where I see like it be really helpful to have higher level projects. Like you can write your own eBPF based tooling, but I see a lot more people using a project like Cilium that's allowing them to get the benefit of eBPF without having to dive into all the data and details that eBPF unlocks. So I think there's a lot of challenges around the scale of data that eBPF provides, but I think a lot of that can be mitigated by using a higher level project like Cilium or Tetragon, for example, and not having to worry about that, what's under the hood as much.
Absolutely, absolutely. That gives me a complete understanding about what are the challenges. Now, now truly, I would just like to understand, like, heading on to the future, like looking ahead, like what do you think would be the the important opportunities, or let's say the biggest challenges for the people who are working in the eBPF in the cloud native networking communities? Like, what do you see for that?
Yeah, so the biggest challenges in eBPF is, kind of expanding it out to more and more use cases and making it more like friendly for people to start developing. I think it's really been this core Linux technology, and I think it'll continue to be so, but being able to make it a little bit more accessible. For instance, like make the eBPF verifier, like the errors that you're getting from that more understandable. And there's a project about doing that. And opening up eBPF to more languages. Right now, the main ones people write it in is like C, Go, and Rust, and there's good libraries for that. But can we expand to additional languages to bring eBPF to more developers? So there's like a newer library that's like bringing Java to eBPF, right? And what other languages can we do that people are interested in too? And then on the Cilium side, it's kind of like what I was talking about before. Like we're seeing this convergence of infrastructure. So it's not just your containers. It's how are you going to manage your containers and virtual machines and bare metal machines and hardware all together. And so it's being able to provide a coherent and unified experience for networking across all of these technologies, I think is going to be like the biggest and actually also the most exciting challenge for like the next decade is like, how can we make infrastructure better?
Right, right. I'm, on a personal note, Bill, I just would like to ask you, like, when you just, first, when you tried your hands on with respect to the Linux kernel-based eBPF, like, what was your reaction? Like, did you, attracted or let's say inclined to it immediately, or were you having a little bit of reservations of, trying it in the further run?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was like 5 years in cloud native before I came to Isovalent and kind of really started to dive into eBPF. And I thought I knew a little bit about what was going on, but the first time I started talking about eBPF and people were diving into Linux kernel code, I suddenly realized it was a whole different world that I wasn't aware of. And it's, like pretty like deep in the details. Like people are even talking about, like we're like modifying bits and like this is, like small modifications in the stack. And I was like, wow, this is a very different world. And I don't write any code, but like being able to understand that was like a whole new process and a fun new learning curve, but definitely a challenge for me too, again. But I think that's fun.
That's brilliant. And you also mentioned out to me in the starting that you had a degree in biochemistry. So biochemistry and technology, they are like two different, there are two parallel type of courses, or let's say parallel type of worlds. So how did you, find your way all the way into the IT side? I know I'm pretty much familiarized with the fact that you were in sales and marketing, but why all of a sudden to IT?
Yeah, I would say your career is long and you never know which way it's going to go. I think kind of like the approach that I've always taken is to follow like the next interesting thing. So usually what I've done in my career is combine what I already know and then kind of like find the adjacency, so combining it with something new. So I was in biochemistry, and then I looked at the intersection of biochemistry and AI. So then I was in AI. And then I looked at the intersection of AI and Kubernetes. And that's how I got into Kubernetes. And then from Kubernetes, I looked at the intersection of that and eBPF, which is how I got into Cilium. So it's kind of taking what I already know and combining it with something new is kind of like led me on this interesting journey to come into tech.
Yeah, as they always say, right, Mike, it's always like a learning. And every time you learn, you pick up new things. And whatever you learned in the past, you try to, adapt that, for the new things that you learn. So that's a pretty much interesting thing. Now, like, I mean, I'm going too much into biochemistry, but actually that actually makes me very interested to know more about it. So, since you were part of the biochemistry course, so do you find any similarities for what you have learned in the biochemistry side or to that of, what you're doing currently? I mean, towards the space of Cilium and eBPF, any kind of, small similarities kind of thing.
I mean, the funniest is, right, Cilium are like kind of like the things in the cell that help, like, for instance, like move
Okay.
things around. And so I think it's like always funny to be looking on social media and finding mentions of Cilium, and it's talking about like cell biology, right, rather than the infrastructure software. But I think it's always fun to like look back and like see some of the images that I used to do in my previous life and previous career.
Right. So if I try to understand this, Cilium and eBPF are more like an advanced version of biochemistry, or let's say biochemistry integrated with the advanced version of technology, right?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So, Bill, before we actually conclude our podcast session, let's take a pretty lighter route. So all this time we were talking about your journey, your tenure, about what was eBPF and Cilium. I think I asked a lot of questions about eBPF and Cilium that, now I got a clear picture of it. So now without all that thing, we're just going to talk about, the likes and interests. So let's say dislikes and pretty about your own interesting points. So let's go off with a lighter version, or let's say with a quick rapid fire round. So yeah. So now, Bill, if I would just like to ask you, like, if I would like to ask you, like, what is your favorite sport? Is it football or is it anything with related to the basketball? Like, which one would you pick out?
I would actually pick biking. I really like bike packing and seeing different parts of the world with pedals.
Okay, all right. So what's the best part of Berlin that you love the most?
It's a city of freedom. You can be whoever you want to be, and yeah, it's a creative space to become who you want to be.
All right. So do you follow the Bundesliga?
I do not follow the Bundesliga.
All right. What's your favorite Indian dish that you like to have the most?
Oof, that's a tough question. There's like so many good ones. Since I bike a lot, I really like carbs, so I would have to go with the naan bread.
The naan bread. All right. That's good. So what was the last book or the last film that you watched or read?
Uh, I just flew back from the US for a wedding, and I watched a movie about, I forget the name right now, but it was about just seeing important moments in time in a person's life and how little things can change everything.
All right. All right. So, okay. So now, I mean, if I ever visit Berlin, what is the place that you recommend me the most to have a visit for?
Yeah, one of the favorite places I like to go is Urban Nation, which is an urban art museum, which is kind of a unique take of bringing the outside art inside, but there's always like interesting, thought-provoking social commentary in all of the art.
All right. So, Bill, thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule and being part of this podcast initiative of mine. And I mean, our collaboration, and let's say our plan has been going like a month back, and we finally have made it, and it has transpired into this amazing conversation with you through this platform. The major thing what actually starstruck with me, or let's say blew me off, Bill, was about how you have moved from biochemistry and all the way to Cilium and eBPF, and how you're able to correlate both of them. And along with that, what is eBPF and Cilium? That actually gives me an idea, like it's a Linux kernel, which is pretty much interesting. And along with that, like how you started your journey as a community advocate, and then moving into the community space of IT, and all of those interesting insights, and what are the challenges, opportunities, that completely sums up it all. That completely sums it all. So thank you so much again, Bill, for taking time and being part of this amazing initiative. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, listeners, on this note, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, signing off. We would be back with another podcast episode with another eminent industry leader very soon. So, till then, keep listening, take care, stay tuned, goodbye, and au revoir. Thank you.